Starting off at number 10 now, we have the bunker. In 2014, two German friends were hiking in the woods in northern Germany when they saw some strange pipes sticking out from the ground. When they went to investigate, they found the entrance to a hidden bunker. After removing the old wooden door with a crowbar, they climbed inside. They found a labyrinth of endless hallways, each one as creepy as the next. Their voices echoed around the deathly silent corridors which smelt of sewage. The walls were covered in strange graffiti. They hit many dead ends before finally coming to this, a large steel door that had somehow been ripped off its hinges by something very powerful. After exploring some more, they found some graffiti that simply read, "Hello Satan, I love you." After taking a few more pictures, they decided it was probably best to leave. At number 9 now, we have the stalker. This story comes from Reddit user Senor Puffy Pants. The name is about as fun as this story gets. He said that when he was a park ranger, he once led a trip of 8 school kids up Mount Sterling in North Carolina. They set up camp at the top of the mountain under a bright full moon, which lit up the whole area. He settled in for the night with a very clear view of the trail they had just walked up. As he drifted off to sleep, he saw something move on the trail. At first, he thought it must just have been a bear, but as he got closer, he saw it was actually a person. It was a man with no headlamp or any gear on, just on top of the mountain. The ranger froze and watched the man move closer to the camp. He could only see the outline of him in the dark. The man then surveyed the camp and then sat down under a tree facing the camp. The ranger decided to just wait it out and stared back at him in the dark. This went on until 3:30 in the morning, when suddenly the man just stood up and headed back down the trail. To this day, the ranger has no idea who he was or what he wanted, and he never told the kids about this creepy stalker encounter. Moving on to number 8 now, we have red hair. This is a crazy story coming from California. Nicole Gurgeon was hiking with 2 other friends in Santa Barbara when she decided to take some pictures of her friends descending down a cliff face before seeing something in the corner of her eye, a small flicker of red hair. Right there. Then she saw it move. They hurried over and found Sailor Gwilliams, a hiker who had fallen off the cliff earlier. She had broken her elbow and ankle. By the time Nicole found her, Sailor's lungs had given out and she was lying face down in the mud and leaves, surrounded by buzzing flies. It turns out her friend had also injured himself but had died while trying to get help. Nicole was amazed that she managed to spot Sailor at all, and many people said she would have died if she hadn't dyed her hair red. Next up at number 7 now, we have the cabin in the woods. This is creepy but also kind of fascinating. In 2015, rangers deep in California's Acata Forest found a cabin. It wasn't just any old pile of wood either, it was a solid, expertly built home with a concrete foundation. It had a porch, windows, and a fully equipped interior. It was also perfectly concealed. The people who found it said that if you walked more than 15 feet away from the cabin, you struggled to see it again through the trees. There were no trails that led to the house and not a single piece of trash in sight. They found a newspaper there dated from just a few months before, but of course there was no sign of the owner. When they left, they hung a sign up for the owner telling them that they had to leave the property. When they returned a few days later, they found it had gone. As in, the whole cabin and everything in it had disappeared without a trace. What do you guys make of this mystery? Got any good theories? Because I really don't. At number 6 now, we have the toys. This is another creepy story from Reddit coming from user Genesis Pro Torch. He said that a group of teens from his area hadn't been heard from after a camping trip. He decided to join the search and rescue team and headed out to the general area. After hiking through the woods all day, they found nothing. But about 35 kilometers into the woods, they began to notice strange things around them. There were sticks carved like spears in the ground, carvings in the trees, and a child's stuffed animal hanging from a noose in a tree. Everything seemed freshly carved, as if it had just been done a few hours before. They kept hiking before eventually making camp for the night, trying to put the day's images to the back of their minds. The next morning they packed up the gear when they noticed a small bit of shirt that had got caught on a tree and ripped, along with some shoe prints. They thought, great, the teens must be nearby then. That's when they got a call from base camp that the teens had just been found 20 kilometers away. Chills ran down their spines. If that wasn't left by the teens, then who was it left by? Moving on to number 5 now, we have Wessie. Deep in the woods near Present Scott River in Maine, people have found a disturbing piece of skin. A huge piece of skin, specifically a giant snake skin. Locals have said for years that they've always seen a massive snake just slithering between the trees, but the reports weren't really taken too seriously until they found a 10-foot long piece of snake skin. People refer to the snake as Wessie, a play on the famous Nessie, aka the Loch Ness Monster. Experts say that Wessie Wessie was probably a boa or python snake and was a pet that either escaped or was just dumped. At number 4 now we have the ghost. Reddit user Zombie Gandafi said that back in the 80s his uncle and some friends were on a road trip passing the Grand Canyon when they decided to take some pictures. This is one of them. The uncle is there posing precariously on the edge of the cliff. It wasn't until after the picture they noticed something in the photo, or should I say someone. Right there at the edge of the tree line appears to be a man dressed in all black with a pale face and a knowing smile. The uncle maintained that they were the only people at that spot on the day. In fact, the area was almost empty as it wasn't even tourist season. Speculation about who this figure was has ranged from him being a wandering ghost to the Grim Reaper himself. Coming at number 2 now we have Latin. This one comes from Reddit user BrownCow5. It's a bit of a short one but pretty sweet, or rather short but creepy. She said that one day her and her friend were hiking in the middle of nowhere during winter. They were going through the trees when they came to a clearing. They realized there was writing drawn in the snow in front of them. The words were in Latin and read per audacia ag ignotum. There were no footprints leading to or away from the writing. When they got back home they translated it to read through audacity towards the unknown. What was going on there? Really creepy. For me, that's almost like someone was just zapped into a parallel universe after leaving that writing. What do you guys think?
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot we have pink dolphins. There's a few weird things going on with these guys, but let's start with the most obvious, which is of course their color. These residents of the Amazon River are the largest of all river dolphins, and adults end up acquiring a strange pink coloring, which is more prominent in the males. Scientists aren't exactly sure why these guys are pink or why their color comes later in life, as they are born with a more gray color that is usually expected of dolphins. There are of course theories as to how they get their colors, however, with the most common being the thought that the color is brought on by scar tissue that results from either rough games or fighting with other pink dolphins or predators. I said at the beginning of this point that they are strange for a few reasons, and while their super unique and gorgeous color is one, the other has less to do with them and more about a very interesting legend that surrounds them. Legend goes that these dolphins actually transform into very handsome men in the evenings, and during this time they hypnotize and seduce young women before turning back to dolphins again near sunrise. The origins of this myth are rooted in some pretty dark cover-ups, so I think it's best if we just lay that one to rest and let these dolphins not take the blame for humans' awful behavior. In our number 9 spot today we have the boiling river. It is pretty common knowledge that the Amazon is home to the longest river in the world, but there is another river found in the Amazon rainforest that is equally as astonishing, but for a very different reason. The boiling river got its name for being exactly that, as it is a river that is near a boiling point at all times. The water temperature reaches up to 93 degrees Celsius, which is just shy of the boiling point, and the steam coming off of the surface of the water is an obvious warning to all living creatures that it is absolutely unswimmable. You could however poach an egg in this river, although that's probably not the recommended cooking method. There is still debate around the source of heat for this river, but as of right now it is believed to be entirely natural and geothermal. Despite the river not being near any active volcanoes or geothermal vents, it is quite an anomaly. There are of course more local legends that state the river is a place of power and that the Mother of Waters is responsible for the creation of this incredible and strange river. Either way, just don't swim in the river and everything will be fine. In our number 8 spot today we have Victoria amazonica. This water lily is one of many abnormally large things that can be found in the Amazon rainforest, and it is found in the shallow waters of the Amazon River basin. These lilies are not only the world's largest water lily, but they can also hold the weight of an adult human. They will begin to flower as the sun sets and take up to 48 hours to completely open, and they are absolutely beautiful. These flowers are not only super strong and super beautiful, but as they open they also release a wonderful scent, which leaves me wondering if there's anything they can't do. One thing to be careful of though, if you encounter one and decide to step on it, it is that their leaves have thorns to protect them from predators, so watch out for those. Actually, on a second thought, just because they can hold a human doesn't mean we have to step on them at all. let's just admire their beauty and strength from afar and let them just be lilies like they're meant to be. In our number 7 spot today we have the potu. I don't know if that's how you say that, but that's what we're going with. Okay, these guys definitely aren't the strangest thing on today's list, but they certainly look extremely strange. I'm sure a lot of us have seen a picture of them at some point because of their wild appearance that reminds you of your one friend that just can't quite keep it together. But despite them having a bit of a silly look on their faces, these birds actually possess some pretty cool skills. They are masters at disguising themselves and have the ability to remain motionless for days on end. They're nocturnal creatures, so it isn't often that we get to spot them flying around, and during the daytime they're so good at camouflaging themselves that you'll likely only be seeing them if they want to be seen. This is just one of those scenarios where we are reminded to not judge a book by its cover, because despite their goofy appearance, they're actually pretty serious birds with some serious talent. In our number 6 spot today we have the bullet ant. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. I'm sure the bullet ant is one creature on this list that many of us know about, but that certainly doesn't mean it isn't very strange. These creatures are obviously ants, but with one feature that makes them unlike others of their kind. They are the world's largest ant, which is cool, but their name is where things get a little crazy. Some people believe they are named for their size, as they are roughly the size of a bullet, but it is much more widely speculated that they are named because of the fact that their sting feels like getting shot by a bullet. I have not seen a bullet ant in real life, or been bit by one, and also haven't been shot, so I cannot confirm any of these things, but that's just what the internet tells me. The pain is said to last for 24 hours and causes waves of burning, throbbing, and all-consuming pain, which sounds like something I absolutely do not want to experience. Maybe these guys are where the term small but mighty comes from, considering their bite is considered to be one of the most painful things a person can experience. I think I might try my best to stay away from them, even though it's unlikely I'll die from a bullet ant. I'm just not taking any risks, and I'd rather not go through that kind of pain if I can avoid it. In our number 5 spot today we have Rafflesia. Okay, remember how I said that there's a bunch of abnormally large things that can be found in the Amazon rainforest? Well, here's another one just to prove I wasn't lying. This flower is the world's largest flower, but it also has no roots, no stems, and no leaves, and instead lives as a holoparasite on the vines of a tetrastigma, which is a genus of plants in the grape family. This flower is very similar to fungi, and the only identifiable feature that is distinctly plant-like are the huge flowers, but even those are unusual, of course, due to their unbelievable size, as well as their reddish-brown color. One more strange part about these huge flowers is their smell, which apparently is comparable to rotting flesh. These flowers are also apparently on the verge of extinction, so between that and the smell, I feel like this might just be a flower to stay far, far away from. In our number 4 spot today we have the decoy building spider. Okay, I do not like spiders, so I really didn't want to include any on this list, but I absolutely had to once I found out about this small but mighty creature. These decoy building spiders are exceptionally small but super smart. These spiders only measure to be about 5 millimeters in length, but you might see a much larger spider hanging out in a web they created. This might sound alarming, but this spider is actually a decoy that the small spider built out of various materials such as food scraps, debris, and even their own old shed skin. It might not be the most beautiful work of art, but that is an unbelievable defense mechanism for such a tiny creature. These spiders were actually only discovered pretty recently, so not too much is known about them, as there still needs to be a ton of research done. It is, however, believed that this is a feature that has evolved in this particular spider, so it is possible that we only recently discovered it because it might be a newer feature. But the Amazon rainforest does hold many, many living creatures that we have yet to identify, so who really knows? All in all, this spider is very unique and strange, and basically the Michelangelo of spiders. In our number 3 spot today we have the corpse flower. Okay, we're back with another strangely large thing, and this time it is another flower that is called the corpse flower, which is a terrible nickname for a flower. This flower is deep green on the outside and a beautiful burgundy color on the inside, and it also features the world's largest unbranched inflorescence in the world. Both male and female flowers grow inside of the same inflorescence inflorescence, but the females bloom first with the males following in a day or two, which usually prevents the flowers from self-pollinating. These plants usually require 7 to 10 years before the initial blooming period, and after that, the blooming tends to be fairly sporadic. Some will take another 7 to 10 years, and some are able to bloom every other year. As the flower blooms, it is around human body temperature, which allows for its scent to be quite prominent, which you'd think would be nice, but apparently this is another flower that smells like a rotting corpse, which is where it gets its awful nickname from. These odors, however, are super helpful to the plant as it allows it to attract pollinators, which are usually insects that like to feast on rotting flesh. So I guess while the scent is unbelievably unpleasant to humans, at least there are creatures that are more helpful to this flower that actually enjoy it, which I guess is just probably for the best. In our number 2 spot today, we have this plastic-eating fungi. This is a fungi that could help us solve one of the world's most pressing issues, which is the overpopulation of plastic. We have way too much plastic on this earth and virtually no way to get rid of it, but this discovery could help us fix that. This is the very first fungus ever found that can support itself on polyurethane in anaerobic conditions, which means that it not only can consume plastic, but it also does not require oxygen for growth. In fact, oxygen may even affect it negatively, which could make it a perfect species to help remove plastic from our oceans and other places with little to no oxygen. This is a fairly new discovery, which means it of course is still in the research phase. It will require more time before we are exactly sure how to best utilize its incredible properties, but this may be the solution to one of humanity's biggest questions and problems. And of course, this isn't a ticket to just start throwing plastic in the oceans, and should serve as a reminder to us all that our Earth is full of unbelievable things, and if we stopped ruining it for a second, we might be able to realize its full potential and see just how lucky we all are to have such a beautiful planet. In our number 1 spot today, we have silkhenge. Okay, we already talked about one spider that was actually pretty cool, and begrudgingly I have to talk about another one because it also is equally as unbelievable, but here's the strangest part about it. We don't even actually know what the spider is. There is some kind of spider that is making what is referred to as silkhenge. This piece of spider art was first discovered in 2013 by Troy Alexander, who posted a photo of it on the internet asking for help in identifying it, but no one could help because it's a totally unknown phenomena. These structures are created by spiders and help with reproduction because they're actually protecting eggs. There's one main spire that is constructed of spider silk, and that is where the eggs are contained, and then surrounding that spire is a sort of circular fence that is also made of spider silk. The name comes from its similar appearance to Stonehenge, and no one knows what kind of spider is making these insane structures, or if it's a multitude of different kinds of spiders. Either way, it certainly is one of the most astonishing things being created by a tiny, mysterious creature. Hopefully one day we find out the creators of these sculptures so we can give them the proper credit they deserve. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the peanut head bug. Of course there is a scientific name for this bug that certainly makes it seem more sophisticated, but the peanut head bug definitely sounded a lot more fun. These guys love to live in tropical forests and can be found in Mexico as well as both Central and South America. Okay, so there's a few crazy things going on with this bug, so let's start off with the elephant in the room, which would be the peanut head. This bug reaches a length of up to 85 to 90 millimeters, with its head being as long as 10 to 15 of those millimeters. Other than being shaped like a peanut, this bug has false eyes that resemble that of a lizard or a serpent, which of course acts as a deterrent to predators. When being attacked, this bug will also spread its wings, which will then display another yellow pair of much larger false eyes, as well as releasing a terrible smelling substance. I feel like all of those traits have definitely qualified this bug to be on today's list, but let's just add one more for good measure. These bugs will also knock their heads on a hollow tree in order to create vibrations for mates. Okay, now I'm really done talking about the peanut head bug. In our number 9 spot today, we have the walking tree. Okay, so these trees got their name because of a myth surrounding them that would suggest they are able to walk. I mean, extremely slowly, but that's what it would seem. As cool as that would be to imagine trees roaming around the forest floor while humans aren't around, these trees aren't actually walking, of course, but what is happening is still pretty cool and definitely worth talking about. Basically, these trees just have a really amazing root system. Firstly, these trees look like they're almost on some kind of stilts, which isn't necessarily the most usual thing to see, but it's just all a part of their roots. It isn't quite clear why these trees appear this way, and there have been many theories as to why, but none have been proven yet. The walking myth comes from the fact that it is believed that as conditions on one side of the tree improve, the tree will be more likely to be regrowing near that side and will allow the roots on the opposite side to kind of just die off. This of course could potentially lead to very minimally small movements over an extended period of time, but it still makes sense as to where the story may have come from. The trunk is used in the construction of houses and other structures, as well as hunting spears, and the inner parts of the stilt roots are used as a male aphrodisiac. This tree produces a yellow fruit which is edible as well. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Brazilian grape tree. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. This tree is a slow growing evergreen tree that features salmon pink leaves when it's young before they turn green as it matures and gets older. That's not the only strange and interesting thing about these trees, however, as they grow their grape-like fruit right on the trunk, which isn't the most normal thing for trees. These fruits are purplish black and can be eaten raw, or they can sometimes be used to make jam. While this tree is very adaptable, in its preferred climate, this tree can flower and fruit up to 5 or 6 times a year. The most common diseases that affect these trees are rust, canker, dieback, and fruit rot. So while there's a lot about these trees that are of course similar to other trees in general, this one definitely has some unique features that landed it a spot here today. In our number 7 spot today, we have the zombie ants. Okay, this one might be small scale, but it is truly straight out of a horror movie. There's a type of insect pathogenic fungus that is commonly found in tropical forest ecosystems. This fungus infects a certain kind of ant, and once infected, this ant basically turns into a zombie. Good news is the ant doesn't suddenly go around eating others of its kind, but it is still being controlled and manipulated by this fungus. The ant will leave their nest in usual trails and head for the forest floor, which has better conditions for fungal growth. From there, the ant will then bite and attach itself to a major vein on a leaf and basically just stay there until it dies, which is usually around 4 to 10 days. During these days, the fungus will start to basically sprout out of the ant's head so as to be prepared to infect the next unsuspecting creature. Okay, that one might have been the grossest one on this list. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Amazon rings. This discovery was made by archaeologists, and while not much is really known about it, it was a discovery that did change what we once believed. So basically, a bunch of ditches were found in the landscape of the Amazon. Most of them are round, but there are also other shapes. It's unclear what they were used for, but the theories range from defense to drainage to maybe even ceremonial or spiritual reasons, but the coolest thing about these rings is that they are older than the Amazon forest itself. It is so unbelievable to see these ancient relics of our past civilization, and considering how we couldn't live without the Amazon rainforest, it's crazy to think of a time when it didn't even exist yet. Unfortunately, this discovery only happened because of the ongoing and devastating deforestation that plagues the Amazon and those who live in it every single day. In our number 5 spot today, we have Electrophorus electricus. This guy is way better known as an electric eel, despite it really not being an eel at all, and rather a knife fish. Until 2019, this was the only species in its genus, which is super cool. These guys have actually been reclassified several times because of the fact that they really are just quite unusual. They grow to be around 2 meters long and are a dark gray-brown color on their backs, but more of a yellow or orange color on their bellies. They have 3 main abdominal organs: the main organ, Hunter's organ, and Satch's organ, which all take up about 4/5 of its body, but are responsible for the ability to produce electricity. Basically, they can produce either low voltages, which are used to sense their surrounding environments, or high voltages, which are used to detect prey and subsequently stun them. While this guy isn't a huge threat to humans, there have been a few documented instances of people dying from their electric shock, so I think this is one creature that maybe I'll just stay away from. In our number 4 spot today, we have poison dart frogs. These frogs do look kind of cute, but they apparently are one of the most toxic creatures on Earth. They can be a variety of colors from black, yellow, red, green, copper, or blue, and it all depends on their habitats and how toxic they are. These colors can help them to keep predators away, as it is a sign that eating them is probably not worth it, but if that's not enough of a deterrent, they've got a special weapon ready to go. It is said that the poison from one of these frogs would be enough to kill 10 adult humans, which is crazy. The name of these kinds of frogs came from the old tradition that the indigenous people of Colombia used, where they would cover the tip of their blowgun darts with the frog's poison before hunting. Aside from these guys being super small but super poisonous, another strange thing about them is that we don't actually know where their poison comes from, but at the moment it is believed that it may be their diet. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Hamza River. Many of us already know about the Amazon River, and in part 1 we talked about the boiling river, but today we have a much less well-known river that is actually super interesting, and that is the Hamza River. This river wasn't discovered until very recently in 2011. This river is actually roughly the same size as the Amazon River, so why wouldn't we know about it? Well, it's because it's located 4 kilometers underground. This river also isn't really a river at all, but more of a slowly flowing aquifer. Both the Hamza and the Amazon River are the 2 main drainage systems for the Amazon basin, and the pair forms a geologically unusual instance of a twin river system that flows at different levels of the Earth's crust. While the Hamza is considered slow and only has 3% of the flow that the Amazon River has, that 3% is still 46 times that of the Thames. I'm not gonna lie, I never thought I'd get excited at the idea of a river, but this one is actually pretty cool. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Tyrant King Leech. These disgusting creatures were discovered quite recently, and I wish we never even knew they existed. These guys have 8 teeth, and their discovery came after one was found feeding on the mucous membrane of a girl who had recently bathed in the upper Amazon. Unlike other leeches, these guys only have 1 row of teeth, but they are disproportionately large. These horrifying things do not drop off their hosts after feeding, but instead will remain attached for days or even weeks. Because these guys prefer the mucous membranes, they aim for areas like the mouth, throat, and nose. Because of their small size, they aren't easily detectable at first either, but once attached, they can grow up to 7 centimeters, so surely they'd be noticeable by then. I'm not sure if these guys or the zombie ant fungus is worse. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Amazonian giant centipede. Okay, thank God this is the last one on this list because I am so freaked out by all of these creepy crawlies we're talking about today. These centipedes are the largest centipede species in the world, with the ability to grow over a foot in length. These gross things will prey on basically anything that they can, which includes other large insects, spiders, millipedes, scorpions, and even tarantulas. But because they're so huge, it also includes small lizards, frogs, snakes, mice, and even bats. They have crazy hunting techniques for the largest of their prey and have been known to climb to the ceiling of caves in order to get to the bats, which is both incredible and so scary. These things are also venomous, and while it hasn't been a common occurrence for humans to die from a bite, there is one recorded incident that took place in 2014. This incident happened in Venezuela, and a person passed away after being bitten by one of these giant centipedes after it had hidden itself inside of an empty soda can. There are a lot of dangerous things crawling around on the forest floor of the Amazon, but this one might take the cake on being the most disgusting looking.
Number 10. Abandoned car. A desert park ranger on Reddit shared a few of their stories that they had experienced while working. One that stands out is their discovery of a burned and abandoned car. When they received the report, they weren't too shocked, as it wasn't a rare occurrence that cars would be stolen and abandoned, occasionally being burned. When they found the vehicle, and as they waited for the fire department to arrive, they were left standing in shock, as it was clear that there was a body left in the front seat of the car. They discovered rope and other strange items in the car, and it was determined that the body had been tied up and killed. The police arrived, but no answers ever came about what had happened there, and they now refer to the area as the haunted site. Number 9. Abandoned sites. It's not uncommon to find abandoned campsites in the woods, but these rangers share their stories of the unique, strange, and scary things they found that made them stand out. The first was an abandoned house with a small shed hidden behind it. The shed had a large steel door which had been broken off its hinges when they found it. The windows had been boarded over and covered up, but venturing inside, they found only a queen-sized bed covered with burned sheets. The next was an abandoned tent found very close to the walking trail. Inside was a large stash of food like beans and rice, a sleeping bag, and a lonely teddy bear. Sometimes the stories with the least information and answers are scariest, as they allow our minds to wander and imagine various frightening scenarios. Number 8. Search returns strange evidence. A ranger and their coworker were called to head out and search for a group of teen hikers that had become separated from their group. They spent most of their day heading in the direction of where the teenagers had last been seen. Eventually, deep into the woods and their journey, they came across a startling discovery. They found branches which had been carved into spears placed into the ground, unidentifiable carvings in trees, children's stuffed toys hanging from ropes tied to the trees. One thing they noticed was that the symbols in the trees appeared to be freshly carved. As would be expected, the two were spooked, but settled down nearby as night was coming and they had to sleep. In the morning, they discovered shoe prints and a piece of fabric that had become caught on a tree. Someone had been there in the night. The teens were later discovered and the two workers returned back to base, never knowing who had been in the woods with them that night. Number 7. Strange creature. A camp counselor in New York made a scary discovery when he was sneaking out late at night to meet up with his girlfriend. It was about 1 a.m. when he heard rustling in the woods next to him, expecting to be faced with something like a bear, deer, or other wild animal. Unexpectedly, a creature burst forth from the bushes towards him. In the darkness, he described the creature's appearance as being 3 feet tall, standing on 2 legs, and having 2 arms, looking like a miniature person. While it can be easy to misidentify animals in the dark of night, I personally can't think of any normal forest creature that would match anything close to this description. He then moved towards it and it apparently got scared, running away in a strange manner that the camp counselor described as being similar to doing the robot dance. To this day, he has no idea what the creature might have been. Number 6. Light on the cliff. An unfortunate part of being a park ranger is having to go on search and rescue missions for missing people, and never knowing what state you might find them in, if at all. One park ranger recounts a story of him and his coworker on one of these calls, searching for a man in his 20s who had gone missing. As they spent the day searching with no luck, they decided to set up a camp and rest for the night. At about 2 a.m., he got up to go to the bathroom when he spotted a bright light moving on a cliff a few miles away, saying it looked to be like a flashlight beam. In the morning, they went to search that area and unfortunately found the missing man's body at the base of the cliff. What caught the ranger's attention was a flashlight, similar to the one he thought he had seen on the cliff. So it seems to make sense. The man had been walking with his flashlight and had unfortunately fallen. But it doesn't end there. When the coroner arrived to inspect the body, it was determined the man had clearly been dead for over 48 hours. So how could it have been him shining his flashlight on the cliff the night before? Apparently, another search and rescue team member had been near the area and hadn't seen any other people. To this day, there seems to be no explanation for what that light was. Number 5. Burned mannequins. Another park ranger on Reddit shared his experience while working at a national wildlife refuge that had formerly been home to a U.S. Army lab site. The site had been completely transformed to become a wildlife refuge, with years of thorough cleanup needing to be done on things like barbed wire fences and barricades before it could be opened. One night, when the ranger was walking deep into the forest, he saw figures in the distance. This caught him off guard, as you're not permitted to leave the trails at all. So who was out there? The ranger announced himself and moved closer, and what he discovered was 6 mannequins in military uniforms, which appeared to have been badly burnt. 6 burned figures standing around in the woods in the dark of night would have been scary for anyone to stumble upon, though apparently he chalked it up to having been part of a fabric test. Still pretty scary to discover though, and to think it was somehow missed in the decade-long cleanup of the park. Number 4. Only resident. A park ranger for a small island was the only year-round resident of the area. The island had no bridges or ferries and could only be accessed by private boats. The island would be crowded in the summer, but in the off-season, the island was only inhabited by the ranger. Walking at night, he was adventuring around the island, seeing if he could hike the entire distance. He saw a flash of white in the distance, thinking it was a herd of the brown and white deer which were local to the area. He pressed forward, before hearing something move again. Suddenly, out of the woods came a 6-foot-tall man wearing a bright white shirt. He sprinted straight up to the ranger with a strange grin on his face before shouting and laughing loudly, quickly sprinting back into the woods again. The ranger was rightfully terrified because, as far as he knew, he was the only person on the small island. For the next few days, he tried to find any evidence of another person living on the island, but never found any campsite, boats, or other signs of life. Number 3. Mysterious stranger. A ranger was leading a hiking trip to the top of a mountain in North Carolina, a difficult hike far from any civilization. When they reached the peak, they set up a camp on a beautiful clear night. Since it was so nice out, after the group had gone to bed in their tents, the ranger chose to sleep outside in a hammock, reading a book to pass the time. Due to the brightness of the camp and the moon, it was easy for them to see around the camp and the trail that they had taken to get there. They were soon caught off guard by the sight of something moving, expecting it to be a bear. But as they got closer, they realized it was the shape of a person. They found it odd to see someone at the top of the difficult and long trail at night with no light or any sign of gear. They watched the person move closer towards the camp before the figure stopped, staring out at the camp. The figure stood there for a while before moving to sit under a tree, still staring intently. The ranger watched the man sit there for what was apparently a few hours, before the figure got up and made his way back down to the trail. This left the poor ranger with a paranoid feeling of being followed for the remainder of the trip. Number 2. Deer head. It's not uncommon to find animals or animal remains in the woods, circle of life and all that. But a Yellowstone ranger described their very bizarre experience which occurred near a valley deep into the park. While walking a trail, they found in the middle of the path the head of a deer. What was strange was that the head was perfectly clean, no sign of blood and no sign of an animal having tried to eat it. The ranger didn't find any other signs of other animals that may have been around the area and done this. They also had no explanation for why a human may have done this, as it was a doe with no antlers that a hunter may want to collect. The experience left the ranger shaking and desperately trying to come up with an explanation for the bizarre and shocking discovery, but none could be found. Number 1. Skin changer. One wildland firefighter shares a story that his supervisor had told him many times. Apparently, in Idaho, the crew had been working on a large fire incident and would have to be there through the night in order to deal with it. The supervisor went out on an ATV to get a look at the nearby area, when a large cat, seemingly a bobcat, ran out into the road. The animal stood there and stared at him for a while, before letting out a loud scream and running up a tree nearby the road. While startling, it didn't appear to be any reason for concern. Further down the road, he discovered an abandoned cabin. This was also strange, as the land was federal property and there should be no buildings. The house appeared derelict and was boarded up, everything inside appearing incredibly out of order. Unsettled, the supervisor got back on his ATV to head back, but at the exact same place where he had seen the bobcat, a woman stood in the road with a nightgown and bare feet. He asked if she needed help, to which she responded with a scream, before running up the same tree the bobcat had, faster than any human would be able to. After returning, he asked locals about the cabin in the area, recounting his experience, to which they told him that he had likely had an encounter with a skin changer. Number 10. The Creek. This first story comes from a park counselor who tells of his experience that he shared with one of his coworkers. When taking a hike with a group to the tallest mountain peak in their state, he and his friend decided to go for a quick hike at night to get away from the group for a little while. They were looking at the stars when he heard what he described as the beautiful sound of water. He had this image of a clear, crisp creek stuck in his head, and the sudden urge that he just had to go find this creek. He said it was not just an urge, but a need. Since it sounded nearby and the need was stuck in the back of his head, he and his friend silently stood up to go in search of it. As the sound got so loud that it must have been right beside them, but they couldn't see anything, they decided they would go in search of it tomorrow. As soon as they made that decision, the sound and desire to find the creek was completely gone. As they stood there in the sudden silence, he said he could feel the presence of someone watching them, but nobody else was around. The pair silently and quickly made their way back to the camp, unsettled by the experience. When they went back the next day and looked at their maps, they discovered that there weren't any creeks, rivers, or other bodies of water that could have made the sound anywhere nearby. He describes how the night had made them both feel like it was a sinister presence attempting to lure them somewhere, and who knows what could have happened if they had continued in their search for the mysterious creek. Number 9. 9. Ghost Woman. One ranger took to Reddit to share his story of a scary prank that became much more than it seemed. He went to a watchtower to cover a night shift due to the large number of night shift workers who had recently been quitting. With a 5-hour energy in hand, he was prepared for the long night ahead. The watchtower was tall with multiple flights of stairs leading to the top, and it was surrounded mostly by thick forests and one small pond. No sounds except that of nature and owls. When he looked out, he saw what looked like a snowman, but with the realization that it was summer, he looked closer and saw it was a kid in what looked like one of those classic ghost costumes made of a sheet with holes cut into it. He radioed his only partner for the night and sent him out to go check out the apparent ghost. When he looked out, the person was gone, and while talking to his partner, the radio suddenly cut off, and he saw his partner's flashlight on the ridge go dark. Things seemed to go completely silent, not even the sound of wind or animals. Scared, he moved towards the stairs, and at the bottom of the stairs he saw a woman, tall, skinny, and dripping with water. Her skin seemed blue, wearing a ruined gray dress, and with milky white eyes and her mouth hanging wide open. He rushed back inside and locked the door, desperately calling out on the radio to his partner. He turned and got startled, seeing the bedsheet ghost standing there. He removed the sheet and found it was just his partner's son, laughing to his father about managing to prank the ranger. He was unimpressed, asking if the woman on the stairs had maybe been his partner's wife. Things grew tense and serious as his partner responded saying that he hadn't put anyone on the stairs. It hadn't been a part of the prank. Number 8. Yosemite National Park. Yosemite is a very well-known park with a great history, and today's story goes back to the person known as the park's first ever ranger, Galen Clark. When he had been close to Grouse Lake, he heard a loud wailing sound and he reported it. He thought that maybe it had just been a lost puppy or other animal, so he didn't think it was a big deal and wasn't particularly scared. However, when he spoke to a group of people at their camp, they told him that he had experienced a ghost, specifically the ghost of a little boy who had drowned in the lake long ago and now howls at anyone who comes near. Just like that, Galen Clark had discovered what came to be known as the Grouse Lake Ghost. People to this day are still told stories of the ghost and report hearing his cries, many avoiding the area in fear of hearing the sound. Number 7. The Lost Hiker. This story comes from a park ranger who works in an area with very dense forests, just north of the United States border. When he signed on to his shift, he got a call for a missing person. Not completely out of the usual for the job. It was described as a hiker who had been missing for the last 2 days, wearing a sweatshirt and a red backpack. He headed out on his truck to the place the hiker had last been seen, and eventually headed out on foot, as he hadn't found the hiker on any roads. He calls for backup and waits, his partner eventually arriving with his jeep. They made their way to a trail where it was common for people to get lost, as the path splits and goes deeper into the woods. They found a campsite, and after looking around, he discovered that his partner was no longer nearby. He waits around for a while, calling out to his partner on the radio multiple times, but getting no response. Eventually, he decides to make his way back down the trail and sees a guy with a red backpack, matching the description of the missing hiker. He described him as walking strangely, not moving his arms, almost like a robot. The man ignores him as he calls out, but eventually nods slowly when asked if his name matches that of the missing hiker. The ranger puts him in the back of his truck and radios his partner again, this time getting a response. What he heard, however, is not what he expected. His partner tells him that he had found the missing hiker, injured, and he's heading back to base. When the ranger told his partner that this doesn't make any sense as he had found the hiker, his partner seemed to panic, saying to lock the truck and grab his weapon, and don't let the man out of your sight. As the ranger cautiously makes his way back to the truck, he finds it empty and badly damaged, no sign of the person that he had found. He sits and waits at the truck, anxious and scared. His partner eventually returns, but he never got any answer of just who or what he had met out on the trail. Number 6. Stairs to nowhere. Have you ever been walking in the woods and seen what is clearly a staircase coming out of the ground and seeming to lead to nowhere? Even if you haven't, there are plenty of people that will tell you that they have. There are many reports of these staircases coming from all over the world. One park search and rescue worker recounts how these staircases in the woods seem to be so common that his coworkers would just tell him not to worry about them, but don't go anywhere near them. The staircases range in age and material, from broken wooden steps to modern staircases built out of stone. While some can be explained as being the remnants of an old broken down building, others completely stand out from the area and seem to be in a well-maintained condition. Some reports have even come in about staircases that would appear to move in the middle of the night, showing up in different areas than where they had previously been. So who built these stairs, and just where might they be leading to? Number 5. Kenai Fjords National Park. A frozen park in Alaska, Kenai Fjords National Park is home to many different urban legends and scary tales. One story goes as follows. In the late 80s, two newlyweds were visiting the park to go dredging for gold at a nearby mud flat. However, they got their ATV stuck in the mud. They got out of the ATV so they could attempt to push it out and rescue their vehicle, but the wife unfortunately got stuck as well. And as the tide rose around her and she was unable to escape, she drowned. When the park's search and rescue team arrived, it was too late for them to do anything, as the tide was too high to make any sort of rescue. They had to wait for hours for it to go back down in order to recover her body. They say that in the area you can hear the voice of a man desperately calling out for help, the sounds of an ATV trying to escape the mud, and the gasps of the young woman fighting for her life. Number 4. Mountain lion. No, this isn't just a story of someone stumbling upon a mountain lion. That would be pretty boring. Well, not for the lion. Instead, this is a story of a scary experience a park ranger had while out scouting for the animals. They had received a lot of sightings, so they went out to search and close off any trails in the area. He was out on his own in a dark forested area of the park around dusk, when he heard what he said sounded like a woman screaming. This wasn't too abnormal, as the call of a mountain lion sounds just like that. He radioed to tell his team that he had heard the lion and was going to go searching to see if he could discover where its territory was. He heard the screaming a few more times, all from the same area, so he marked it down and got ready to head back. But then he heard another scream that sounded dangerously close to him. He starts heading back faster, breaking into a jog to get away. About a mile from the base, the screaming stopped. When he looked back, he saw what looked like the figure of a man. As he walked over and went to tell him to head to the visitors center, he said that the figure took a quote, impossibly long step toward him and let out a scream, just like what he had been hearing and had originally assumed to be the mountain lion. The ranger immediately broke into a run, sprinting back to base and not looking back. By this time, the screaming had moved deep into the woods again. Not mentioning what had just happened, he just told the team that they needed to close the trails in the area and keep people away. Number 3. Mammoth Cave National Park. If dark, spooky, haunted caves are your thing, for some reason, then Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky is the place to be. With over 400 miles of underground passageways, the cave has plenty of stories and experiences from rangers to keep you up at night. In 1839, the cave was curiously turned into a tuberculosis sanatorium by one Dr. John Croghan. As a dark, deep, unventilated cave isn't really the best place for a hospital, 5 patients reportedly died while under the doctor's care. Their bodies were laid out on a slab of stone that was referred to as Corpse Rock, because what else do you call a rock with corpses on it? Rangers and visitors alike can apparently hear the ghosts coughing whenever they walk by the slab, and the most common ghost sighting reported by rangers is that of Stephen Bishop, a servant of the doctor who worked as a tour guide and ranger. He apparently likes to tag along on the tours and apparently shove and grab unsuspecting visitors. Number 2. The Man with Black Eyes. Another search and rescue team member recounts this story that happened to them while looking for a young woman who had been separated from her hiking group. They were out late at night as their dogs were tracking the scent when they found her curled up and scared behind a log. While she didn't have any injuries, it was clear that she had been scared by something. While walking back to base, she kept looking behind her, questioning why a big man with black eyes was following them. The rangers brushed it off, just thinking it might have been a symptom of shock. As they kept going, however, the woman got worse, telling the man to stop making faces at her, and even turning and yelling into the forest for the man to leave her alone. Suddenly, everyone started hearing weird sounds all around, an indescribable, deep and rhythmic noise. As they were close to the base, the woman turned to the ranger, touching his shoulder and saying, "He tells you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck." The ranger was unsettled as he did have a scar on his neck, but it was hidden under his collar, and there was no way the woman would have seen it. He suddenly heard the strange noise right in his ear, quickly rushing away from the scene with the woman to make it back to base. Number 1. Men in Black. A man was working on a trail crew, building a new trail away from an eroding cliff. By mid-morning, they decided to take a quick break, leaving the 2 other members of their crew behind. He suddenly heard a whistling tune. He thought it was his crew, so he called out to them to leave him alone and let him do his business. The whistling stopped, but then just down the hill, he saw 2 men. They were both dressed in black suits with top hats and carrying canes. They had no water, packs, or anything else they might need for being that deep into the woods. He immediately started walking back to his crew and told them what he saw. They returned back to the area and saw the 2 men again. One of his crew members yelled down at them and waved, but the 2 well-dressed men just ignored them, continuing to walk through the forest off the trails, just weaving in between trees. I guess maybe they might have just been searching for an opera in the woods. Number 10. The Boulder. This pair of rangers responded to a distress call at 4 in the morning that had come from a family camping in Joshua Tree. The story they heard from the family was something they likely hadn't expected to hear. One member of the family was woken up in the middle of the night when a pebble fell from a large boulder next to their site and hit their tent. When they got up, they looked towards the boulder and saw a humanoid creature standing on top of it. They described it as very skinny and strange looking, moving in weird ways, and its eyes glowing in the dark. They said they couldn't mistake it for an animal since it had a flat face, not like a mountain lion or a coyote. As they watched, the creature seems to go down on all fours, crawling down the rock before ascending it again and standing up. He had originally brushed it off as one of his cousins trying to play a prank, but once everyone had woken up, it was clear his whole family was accounted for. As they called out to it, it ran away, and he shined a light on it and said he can't really describe what he saw, except that it appeared to be naked and had a black mark on its body. The rangers tried to calm the family down by saying it was a mountain lion with mange, but I think we all know that what they saw was more than just a big cat. Number 9. Artifacts. One ranger for a coastal park in South Carolina recounts his experience from opening up the park in the mornings. When preparing the park in the morning, you have to go on a complete park tour, which also means riding down the beach. The ranger said that in his 2 years working there, he would often find turkeys and chickens chained up on the beach, placed there to pass away when the high tide came. They also recounted finding many different strange artifacts that were either left behind or had washed up on the coast, including things like random bones or pieces of clothing. He spoke to some of the other staff there, and many told him that this was the remnants of black magic. They also told him not to confuse it with root magic. While root magic is typically used for positive things like asking for love, health, or luck, black magic is generally more negative and usually involves a sacrifice, hence the chickens and turkeys that they had often found. Number 8. Something near the campsite. A group that consisted of a park ranger and 3 botany nerds were hiking in the woods for a few days when they had an incredibly scary experience. Day 1 went off with no problems, but around dusk on day 2, they were startled by the sound of a scream. As they were all pretty experienced, they brushed it off as a coyote and just looked around the area. The next day, however, things got worse as they heard what they described as a tree falling down. As they searched around, they all saw a figure in the bushes looking out towards their campsite. They all started yelling loudly as they thought that maybe it was just a bear that they could scare off. But it wasn't a bear. They saw the figure again, a tall man seeming to be leaning over something and turning to look towards them again. When it stood up, it looked to be over 6 feet tall. As the ranger raised his weapon towards it in fear, it took off into the forest, apparently faster than any human or animal should be able to run. When they went back to the area to see what the man had been leaning over, they found the remains of an animal, but not looking like it had simply been attacked by some other predator. The group were rightfully scared and packed up camp, leaving the area, fearing what they thought might have been a Wendigo. Number 7. No tracks. This story comes from an instructor for a therapeutic wilderness program where he was in charge of the at-risk youth. He was on the clock in charge of the program for 16 days, 24 hours a day. His second year working with the program, he was staying at a campsite with the group, the shelters just being simple yurts. When they settled down that night, it had snowed, leaving a pretty thick coverage on the ground. He was woken up at around 1 in the morning when one camper had to go to the bathroom. When the camper returned, he told the instructor that he had seen someone out there wearing a plaid shirt. He brushed it off as when he looked out, he didn't see anyone. But eventually, a few hours later, nature called him as well. And when he was out there, he saw someone standing in a plaid shirt. He quickly grabbed his flashlight to shine it on the figure, but in the split second it took him, the person disappeared. No sign of him anywhere around the area. He woke up another instructor to go and search for the person, but they didn't find anything. The scariest part? They didn't even find a single footprint in the snow. Number 6. Strange encounter. This one is short and sweet, but I think one of the most bizarre and scary on this list for how real it is. The worker was surveying a restoration site near an old trail when he heard somebody walking up a nearby path. He grabbed all of his things and proceeded down the trail, walking confidently so as not to give the other person the idea that he could be easily taken advantage of. When he turned the corner on the trail, he saw a shirtless man swinging a crowbar around wildly. The man made eye contact with him and yelled out, "I've got a crowbar, I've got a crowbar." crowbar. The worker mumbled out a quick, "Nice crowbar," before turning around and running back to his truck. So no ghosts or mythical beasts in this story, just a terrifying man wielding a crowbar. Totally normal. Number 5. Banjo audience. One park ranger was taking care of 2 pretty remote parks about 30 miles out from any occupied homes, and even then these houses were usually empty during the summer months. One night he decided to hop into his car and head to one of the darker parks so that he could take in the meteor shower that was going to be happening and also get in some practice on his new banjo. He was sitting on a park bench under the stars playing with the banjo strings when he started to get an uneasy feeling in his gut. No, he hadn't eaten some bad food, he was getting the feeling that somebody was watching him. Questions started to go through his head like, what if someone shows up? This is the burned car park, what if they come back? He continued playing to try and avoid the silence when he heard sounds coming from the bushes and he started to really panic. The sounds seemed high-pitched and he started to wonder what reason children could have to be deep in the park late at night. As it turns out, it wasn't children. Instead, 3 coyotes came running out of the bush. Apparently they'd been enjoying the concert. Number 4. Philmont Scout Ranch. A ranger who worked at Philmont Scout Ranch in New Mexico told his story of what had happened on one of his trips, it being a summer camp combined with a backpacking trek. The group were around Uraca Mesa. It's in the shape of a skull and has various different legends surrounding it, like it being haunted or even being a portal to the underworld. One of these stories is that at night you can see strange and unexplained lights coming from the top. Well, this ranger had worked there for 4 years now and never saw them, thinking it was just some crap made up by the other staff. Until one night, a kid pointed up at the mesa and made notice of lights coming from the top. The ranger brushed it off as being the lights of the other group who would be joining them. But when he looked, he realized the lights weren't coming from the trail. They were coming from off to the right behind the mesa, and it didn't look like flashlights at all. They were bright blue. 15 minutes later, the other group arrived and the lights were still there, putting away any ideas that it might have been them. To this day, he has no explanation for what the lights could have been. Number 3. Intense pressure. This story comes from a worker who was doing a survey in a park in the interior of British Columbia. Most of the rest of the crew had already gone home, leaving behind just him and his boss together for a few days to confirm coordinates and finish up some mapping. They made their way out to one area on an old logging route, and from the second they got there, he said that things felt off. 15 minutes later, they heard an incredibly loud whomp sound, saying he could feel the pressure in his ears. He looked towards his boss, who also looked incredibly pale, and they heard the sound again, saying the intense ear pressure and chest pressure made him feel like he was being squeezed. They immediately packed up and left, not discussing the event and never figuring out what it was. But he says that it was most similar to the feeling and sound of a giant bird flapping its wings, leaving many people to believe that he had experienced the legendary Thunderbird. Number 2. The Soldiers. A crew of about 10 people were out in a park in Washington state building dig lines. They were deep into it, about 60 miles from any other sign of life. As they were walking, they came across a clearing. The weird part was that there were 2 helicopters there, along with 7 fully armed military personnel. They had pointed their rifles at the crew, demanding to know what they were doing in the area. They said that they were doing dig lines and had been scheduled to be there, putting their hands up in fear. The soldiers told them to turn around and leave and forget they were ever there. The frightened people said that they were doing government work and they had to be there. One of the military men responded by saying, "No, you're not today, get the F out of here." They weren't going to argue with that, so they turned around and quickly went on their way. I'm sure we've all thought at least once that the government is hiding something from us, and this is a good sign that there's more than meets the eye. I'm not gonna tell you they were guarding aliens, but I bet they were guarding aliens. Number 1. Abandoned. This one comes not from a forest ranger, but instead from a soil conservationist who spent a lot of time looking at cropland and prairie restorations, saying it wasn't uncommon for him to find himself miles from the nearest road. One time he was in a pretty heavily wooded area of his county, about a mile from the road, when he came across a clearing. But it wasn't empty. Instead, it was an abandoned playground and school bus with a rusty swing set and a huge rainbow merry-go-round. While this is creepy enough on its own, he was extra terrified by the fact that the merry-go-round was spinning rapidly in circles, with nothing in sight that would have caused it to move. He called out, and it didn't seem that any people or animals were around the area. Freaked out, he turned around and made his way back. He thought it must have been an old school, so he asked his archaeologist to look and see if anything had ever existed there, but they couldn't find anything about it or why there would have been a playground deep in the woods.
Number 10. Decoy spider. These decoy building spiders are exceptionally small, but they're exceptionally smart. Smart spiders? That's terrifying already. These spiders only measure to be about 5 millimeters in length, but you might see a much larger spider hanging out in a web that they've created. Now, this might sound alarming at first, but this larger spider is actually fake. Yeah, it's actually a decoy spider that the small spider built out of various materials, such as food, scraps, debris, and even their old skin. These spiders were only discovered pretty recently in the Amazon, so not too much is known about them, as there still needs to be tons of research done. All we know is that they like to make things that look like a large spider, and that's terrifying enough. Maybe it's for defense purposes, or maybe it's like the ancient Romans, you know? Maybe they're just statues honoring a spider god. That's terrifying. I take that back. Number 9, red belly piranha. I don't have to explain to you why a piranha is a bad idea to get near. I mean, we've all seen Piranha 3DD, right? That's a timeless classic. Well, the red-bellied piranha is one of the most dangerous piranhas in the piranha game. Its behavior is way more aggressive than that of an average piranha. It's almost like an acre of the rainforest disappearing every second is making it more aggressive. Yeah, I'd be aggressive too in those waters, no doubt about it. Number 8, the electric eel. I say, ooh, girl, don't touch this. First of all, never rub an electric eel like that. Never rub one like they're a genie lamp. You'll want more than 3 wishes at that point. That's horrible. That was the moray eel. That one, bite your fingers off easily, but you should never touch an eel in the first place because a lot of them are electric. As its name suggests, these type of eels can mess you up even if you were to get the first hit. Specifically, the newly discovered 2.5 meter Electrophorus volti, appropriately named after Alessandro Volta, aka the guy who invented the battery. It can release a shock up to 860 volts, more than 7 times the voltage of a wall plug. Number 7, the green anaconda. Of course, we have to mention the anaconda. It's so scary. The biggest snake ever. That's horrible. This movie came out 25 years ago. I remember watching it with my family. It made me extremely afraid of snakes and water. Although the green anaconda is a non-venomous snake, the boa constrictor is still one of the most feared. Obviously, look at its size. Green anacondas live in calm marshes or slow streams. They wait until their large prey gets thirsty, and once they come to the water, the anaconda suffocates its lunch. It wraps itself around it like 17 times. It's the scariest thing I've ever seen. And then it just slowly eats it. It's so scary. It's so dinosaur, really. Anacondas hunt prey that's larger than us humans, so if they wanted to, they could for sure just swallow us whole. There's only no evidence of it happening because humans rarely interact with them. So yeah, let's keep that ratio at the 0 point. That would be great. Don't be the first guy to get eaten by an anaconda, please. Number 6, the boiling river. Ooh, this one's hot. It's real hot. It's pretty common knowledge that the Amazon is home to the longest river in the world, but there's another river found in the Amazon rainforest that is equally as astonishing, but for all the wrong reasons. Yeah, it's not good. As its name suggests, water temperatures in the boiling river reach up to 93 degrees Celsius. The steam coming off the surface of the water sure is inviting, but animals and humans know better by now. Yeah, no skinny dipping in this river, or any river for that matter. I don't know, there's still water snakes. There's still debate around the source of the heat for this river, but as of right now, it's believed to be entirely natural and geothermal. Now, despite the river not being near any active volcanoes or geothermal vents, it is quite an anomaly. It's odd, just a hot, inviting river for no reason. There are local legends, of course, that say the river is a place of power and that the mother of the waters is responsible for the creation of this incredible and strange, mystifying river. Yeah, I like the sounds of that way more than geothermal activity. That's cool. Oh, the mother of the waters? Yeah, she heated this one up. Come on in. Geothermal. I'm like, it's hot. You might burn your toes. Number 5, black caiman. If you aren't a fan of alligators, just go ahead and skip to number 4, I guess, because this one's terrifying, honestly. These super alligators live in calm, slow-moving rivers, of course, like the big bad anacondas, places you wouldn't expect a dinosaur to jump out at you. Essentially, that's where you're gonna find one. Just like dangerous river snakes, these black caiman will take it slow. They'll wait for their prey to have a little sip of water, and then, and only then, the largest predator in the Amazon will then race out and grab its lunch, and then quickly return to the water. It's so scary. I've seen this on Reddit. They're fast. They are quite fast. Birds, reptiles, mammals, you name it, this thing can eat it all, and it will eat it all with this big chomping mouth. Between 2008 and October 2013 alone, there were 43 black caiman attacks on people. Yeah, human beings. So stay away from the Amazon, stay away from the water. Don't do anything. Don't even go to zoos anymore. Just stop. Don't even exist. Number 4, silkhenge. We don't even know what spider this is. So yeah, mystery spider leaving mystery art. Here we go. He's the Banksy of spiders. Let's talk about him. There's some sort of spider that's making what is referred to as a silkhenge. Now it's tiny. It's on a little leaf. You will miss this. That's why it's so rare to find. This piece of spider art was first discovered in 2013 by Troy Alexander. Side note, what an amazing name. Like Troy Alexander, you're a Greek goddess, my friend. Troy Alexander posted a photo of it on the internet asking for help in identifying it. I mean, because obviously it's so alien, but nobody could help identify because it's a totally unknown phenomena. And these structures help with reproduction because they're actually protecting eggs. That's the whole purpose. There's one main spire that is constructed of spider silk, and then that's where all the eggs are contained. Then there's also a wall or a fence that's made of spider silk to protect all the eggs in the middle. Therefore, it looks like Stonehenge. That's where it gets its name from, obviously. Stonehenge, silkhenge, they look the same, both fascinating. One's really gross and made of webs, the other's made of rocks and lovely. Hopefully one day we can find out the real creator of these sculptures so we can give them the proper credit they deserve. But number 3, mosquitoes. These guys suck no matter where you are, but when it comes to the Amazon, oh, it's much worse than you could ever imagine, of course, as if anything else is not calming in there. Mosquitoes are one of the most dangerous because they can fly. You don't see them coming, and once they get you, too late, the damage has already been done. They have your blood, now they're gonna go sell it on the black web. If you travel to parts of the Amazon rainforest and you don't have yellow fever vaccinations or extremely strong mosquito repellent, then you are going to have an extremely bad time. Yeah, these guys are just clouds of malaria waiting for you to walk right into. And that's so disgusting. I can't even do it. Even cottages, I can't do it. I'm not a fan of mosquitoes. Number 2, bullet ants. Ugh, Ant-Man would not fight this ant. No way. They're called bullet ants because their bite feels like a bullet wound, so that is a promising start, my friends. It's also referred to as a Paraponera clavata. The bullet ant is commonly found in tropical rainforests in Central and South America. Their sting is considered the most powerful in the world, hence the, bullet alias, and its effects can last 24 hours. That's a long time to be in a horrible amount of pain. These guys get you in a colony though, game over. There's a good chance that you won't survive that. One was bad enough, let alone a colony? Oh, that's terrible. Its venom is so powerful that currently these ants are being studied for its use as a pesticide. So we're sacrificing ants in order to further their research on how to sacrifice ants. Number 1, Brazilian wandering spider. Alrighty, this spider can actually help you guys out. Let's do it. Its bite can give you an erection that lasts for hours. That's a real fact. This animal is also obviously dangerous. Its bite will also hurt, besides, that amazing side effect. You'll be sweating, blood pressure will increase, hence, that side effect. And they're more commonly known as banana spiders. It can be found, of course, in Brazil, and there's 8 different kinds of wandering spiders. So my advice, avoid them all. The science is quite interesting here though. They're trying to create the next Viagra by using the spider's venom.
Number 10, an odd man in the woods. I was a park ranger on a small island, the only year-round resident. I loved the off-season with 400 acres all to myself, no phone, no internet. I was in the old forest one night when I saw a smear of bright white off trail ahead. I figured it was one of the small herd of white-rumped deer, but it moved up the side of the trail before I could get a better look. I heard a sharp bark and froze, then crept forward a few feet. I reached the fork and was straining to see ahead when I heard the crunch and crack of something in the brush behind me. I spun and saw a pale man, 6 foot or taller, with dark hair, wearing a bright white t-shirt about 30 feet in front of me. He gave me a lunatic grin, barked again, a hard, sharp ha, then turned and ran off into the woods. I stood still, scanning the trees, my hand on my weapon. After not hearing anything for a few moments, I backtracked my way to the main trail, then, terrified, sped walked all the way back to my cabin. I don't know who or what it could have been. The way he was running around off the trail convinced me that he knew the island very well, better than me for sure, and that he was hiding out somewhere, but I never found any evidence of a secret lair, and I never saw him again. Number 9. Small humanoid creature. This happened about 8 years ago when I was 21 years old and working as a camp counselor in New York State. The place is basically a bunch of cabins in the woods on top of a mountain, each cabin half a mile apart from the other, so you're pretty isolated in the woods. One night at about 1 a.m. I was sneaking off to meet my camp girlfriend. Suddenly I heard rustling in the woods and I stopped to investigate it. There are bears / other animals, so I was expecting something like that. Then this 3-foot tall humanoid type thing suddenly jumps out of the bushes and looks at me. It's too dark for me to make out any of its features other than it was standing on 2 feet, had 2 arms, and basically looked just like a miniature person without any features. I was curious to what it was, so I started walking towards it and it spooked, bolting back into the woods. I'll never forget how mechanical it looked as it took off running. I have never seen anything on 2 legs run that quickly, so I was pretty confused about what it was. As much as I try to make sense of it, I still to this day have no idea what it was. It was very human, but too short to be a human, and I don't know how a human could run that fast anyway. Now, I feel like this could have been some sort of animal perhaps, but it's still creepy. Number 8. Crying baby. My grandfather used to be the equivalent of a park ranger down in Mexico. He was in charge of patrolling the farms and lands mainly due to people growing illegal substances. One day he said he was patrolling this ranch late at night shift and he heard a baby crying. Now the land is pretty flat, so he looked all ways and saw nothing. He thought maybe it was some goats out in the far as they can sound like crying babies, but as he's walking his route he hears the same sound, looks up in the sky, and swears he saw a witch with black clothing and everything flying towards a mountain. He panicked, ran to his car, and drove off as fast as he could. Now, this could have been a bird or something, but being alone at night outside, your mind can definitely play tricks on you. Number 7. The blue lights. I used to work as a ranger at Philmont Scout Ranch in New Mexico. There's a place on the ranch called Urica Mesa, and there's all sorts of local legends about it being haunted. One of the stories about the mesa is that at night you can see weird lights coming from the top. I've been there for 4 summers and even camped on top of the mesa and had never seen one until one night. A scout troop and I were camped on the back side of the mesa. I hadn't told them any of the haunted stories at this point when one of the kids points up to the mesa and asks, "What's that?" I figured he's seeing some flashlight coming down the trail from the mesa because I know there's supposed to be another group camping with us, so I tell him that. I turn to look and the lights weren't coming from where the trail is, they were off to the right and it's not a flashlight. It's like the light was coming from behind the mesa or from a fire that you can't see. Only it wasn't orange-red like firelight, it was blue. Creepiest thing ever because if the blue lights are real, what else is real? At this point though, I'm still thinking it's the other group, but like 15 minutes later they roll into camp and we can still see the lights. Spooky. Number 6. Perfectly severed deer head found on trail. Ugh. I'm a ranger at Yellowstone. A couple weeks ago I was exploring the Lamar Valley, about 11 miles from the nearest road and even further to the park boundary. There in the middle of the trail is a perfectly severed deer head. No blood, no raggedness at the severance. Perfectly intact. Now this is weird because I have seen wolf and bear spoils and I used to find cougar prey remains in SD with radio tracking just after the cougar made them. This was not any of those things. The head was completely uneaten, eyes, tongue, everything intact. Even the ravens hadn't touched it yet. No catching, no droppings. Right smack in the middle of the trail, but again, no blood. Even a human doing it made no conventional sense. It was a doe, so it had no antlers, plus why leave it in the trail? Whole thing, even in broad daylight, gave me the chills. Just an ocean of waving grass, bison calmly grazing, and a perfectly clear deer head on the path. Now this sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, and I am terrified. Number 5. Dead body. I was a wildland firefighter, specifically a hotshot, for the US Department of Agriculture. We saw a lot of backcountry in national forests that no one ever saw. Once, on a fire in South California, we helicoptered deep into the woods, then hiked 8 or so miles. We were way out when we discovered human remains, clothes, etc. We opened the wallet and find a note. Then found the thing he used with 1 bullet missing. We examined the skull and discovered the guy used it on himself. Very creepy creepy in person. A crew flew out and investigated, piecing together his ID and missing person reports. They discovered he'd been out there for more than a decade. Number 4. Abandoned tent. The oddest thing was the abandoned camp next to the trail. Camping outside of designated campsites is a big no-no, and I was surprised as one day I was walking and found a tent set up directly next to the trail. The trail ran along a nice stream and was a very tranquil spot. Inside I found a cloth sleeping bag, some dirty clothes, lots of food, big cans of SpaghettiOs, and what looked like some leftovers from a refried beans and rice dinner, and a teddy bear. Everything reeked of cigarette smoke. I was reluctant to confiscate everything and leave the individual out there with nothing, but I did take all the food and pack it into a secure food storage box. I left a note explaining where I had taken the food and that they needed to move camp. Now, I was unable to return to the tent for 2 weeks, way too long to leave it sitting there next to the trail. It was basically untouched when I returned. Some trail crew folks had checked it out and let me know, but that was probably it. I packed up the rest and hauled it out. I spent some time poking around in the area, but never saw any other signs of life. It was obviously someone who was not prepared for camping out in the backcountry, judging by the food, equipment, and the teddy bear. I just don't know. Everything, clothing, gear, etc. indicated it was just one individual. Number 3. Moving light. Park ranger here. Another ranger and I were out on a search and rescue call once. The missing person was a man in his 20s. He had gone hiking and had not returned the day that he intended to. When we got the call, it was nighttime, but we hiked a few miles and set up camp on a ridge that had a pretty good view. He had gone into the woods prepared, so we decided to wait until daylight before beginning the search. About 2 a.m. I get up and I am peeing when I see a moving light at the base of the cliffs across the valley a few miles away. Looks like a flashlight beam. I tell the other ranger and we make the decision to keep waiting for daylight. The next morning we decide to check it out in the area and bring this guy home. We got to approximately where I saw the light the night before and started calling his name. Soon we find his body at the base of the cliff. He had fallen 60 feet on his head. The body was badly mangled. We radioed back that it has now become a recovery instead of a rescue. At this point, the other ranger yells at me to come look at this. Lying 20 feet from the man's body was his mag light. It seemed odd, but I thought nothing of it until the other ranger reminded me of the light the night before. It kinda gave me the creeps, but I still dismissed it. Before too long, the coroner arrived and inspected the body. After he took the body back to the lab, he said that the man had been dead for at least 48 hours before we found the body. All of a sudden, the oh crap alarm went off in my brain. I knew that it couldn't be possible. I had the coroner review his work, same results. I tried to find an explanation for the light I had seen, perhaps other hikers, but one search and rescue guy had stayed at the only trailhead in the area all night. No one had come or gone. To this day, I have no clue what I saw that night, but it freaked me out. Number 2. The mysterious stranger. I once led a trip to the top of Mount Sterling in North Carolina. It's a tough climb to get to the top and about 6 miles from the nearest road. I was leading a group of 8 middle schoolers and had one co-instructor. We were camping out on the top of the mountain and it was a beautiful night with a full moon. I laid on a hammock enjoying the scenery and noticed something moving on the trail. Bears are common in this area, so I perked up. As it got closer, I could tell it was a person. We were in the middle of nowhere and there was someone hiking up the trail with no headlamp or any gear. They arrived at the top of the mountain where we were and just stopped. I watched as what appeared to be a man survey our camp. I could really only see the outline of him. He stood there for what seemed like 30 minutes, but may have been 10. He then turned and sat down under a tree facing our camp. He was sitting up in a way that I knew he wasn't trying to sleep. He just sat there staring at our camp. I had no idea what to do. I decided to wait it out. I waited, just staring at the man while he stared at my camp. This went on until about 3:30 a.m. Then he stood up, took a moment to survey the camp a few minutes longer, and then went back down the trail he came up on. To this day, I have no idea what that was all about, and it freaks me out. That freaks me out too. And coming in at number 1, search for hikers runs through super creepy clearing. There was a group that hadn't been heard from after their scheduled return from a camping trip. A coworker and I headed out in the general direction the group had set off in. We'd been hiking for most of the day and seen nothing. We're about 35 kilometers into the woods at this point, and we start noticing odd things. Sticks carved like spears stuck into the ground, weird carvings in the trees, a children's stuffed animal hanging from a noose up in a tree. This place was nowhere near any roads, it wasn't on regular trails people would go on in the area. The really eerie thing was that everything was freshly carved. Somebody had been there within a couple of hours of us and made these things. I noticed a bit of a shirt that had caught on a small tree and ripped along with some shoe prints. We were thinking, great, maybe we're close to the group, when a radio call comes in though. The group had been found 20 kilometers east of us and they're calling everyone back. So what did we find? I have no clue, but my coworker and I headed out of those woods fast, and yeah, I would too.
And we're kicking off this video with stairs. This is something that a lot of you have probably heard of before. There have been many stories and images surfacing online of people, as well as park rangers, coming across stairs in the middle of the forest, leading to some pretty surreal, haunting kind of images. These stairs are often found deep in the woods and can be made of a variety of materials, including concrete and wood. The stairs appear to have been constructed by human hands and appear to be in rather good condition, even though they are often located in areas where there are no buildings or signs of human activity. A supposed paranormal stories surrounding these stairs suggest that they are haunted or cursed, and that those who climb them are doomed to a terrible fate. Some claim that the stairs are remnants of long abandoned structures, while others believe that they are portals to other dimensions or the work of supernatural entities. And I gotta say, I mean, just seeing stairs in the middle of a forest, that would be pretty eerie for me too. I'd be just a little bit freaked out. The search for the missing teens. Reddit user Genesis Pro Tech shared this story. There had been a group of teenagers who went on a camping trip but did not return at the scheduled time. Worried about their safety, Genesis Pro Tech and his good friend, along with a search and rescue professional who knew the area well, were called to assist with the search efforts. After hiking for most of the day and covering about 35 kilometers into the woods, the search party began to notice some strange things. They came across sticks that were carved into spears and stuck in the ground, odd carvings on the trees, and a child's stuffed animal hanging from a tree. These items were all freshly carved, indicating that someone had been in the area recently. The thing is, this wasn't on any of the regular trails in the area, and it was far from any roads. Despite their growing unease, the search party continued to hike through the woods, hoping to find the missing teenagers. As night fell, they set up camp, still on edge from the unsettling things they'd seen earlier, and after a restless night, they woke up at dawn and prepared to continue the search. While packing up the gear though, they found a piece of ripped clothing and some shoe prints nearby. They thought, hey, maybe they were close to finding the missing teens. But then they received a radio call that the teenagers had been found about 20 kilometers away to the east, and that they were calling the search party back. They were pretty relieved about the teens being found, but understandably shaken at the same time. What was all that stuff they'd come across in the middle of nowhere? Next up we have Stalked by a Cougar. A Redditor by the name of Smokey the Marshmallow shared what they described as the scariest incident they had experienced as a park ranger. In Washington state, the ranger had been hiking up an unpopular trail leading to an old shelter where he had a strange feeling he was being watched. Although he had seen fresh cougar scratches and droppings along the trail, which were common in the area, he wasn't worried at first. That night, he camped at the shelter, which had only 3 walls and a roof. He felt a little uneasy throughout the night and didn't sleep much. In an attempt to feel safer, he arranged his emergency foil tarp around his sleeping bag, hoping to hear something if it approached him as he slept. The next day, the ranger found fresh cougar droppings and scratches on the trail he had hiked on. He continued on the trail and found a mostly eaten deer and some dense brush just off the trail. This was an indication that this cougar was nearby, and the ranger began to feel pretty uneasy, as you could probably imagine, given he was at least 13 miles away from civilization. As a result, he decided to just shorten his 3-day trip and quickly made his way out of the area. Probably a smart idea. Badlands National Park, located in South Dakota, is considered to be one of the most haunted places in the United States. Many visitors and park rangers have reported paranormal activities in the park, including ghostly sightings and eerie sounds. The area is known for its rugged terrain, deep canyons, and eroded rock formations, which have become the perfect setting for various ghost stories. It is also home to a dark history of violence and tragedy, leading to many rumors of possible paranormal activity. The area was once a haven for outlaws and bandits as well, who would often take refuge in the rugged landscape. It's rumored that the spirits of these notorious criminals still haunt the park, with visitors reporting strange noises, apparitions, and just feelings of being watched. Visitors have also reported strange lights and unexplained sounds and eerie shadows within the park. The Deer Head. A ranger at Yellowstone National Park posted the following story on Reddit. They stated that they had been exploring the remote Lamar Valley, situated miles away from the nearest road and the park boundary. While wandering on the trail, the ranger came across a bizarre sight: a perfectly severed deer head in the middle of the path. There was no evidence of blood, and the head seemed to be untouched and intact. The person had previously come across the kills of bears and wolves, and even tracked the kills of cougars in South Dakota, but this was something else entirely. The head was of a doe and didn't have antlers, so kind of unlikely that it was a hunter committed this act, and it makes sense for someone to even leave the head in the middle of the trail. Just a perfectly severed, intact head. Yeah. Pretty weird. Next up, we have the booby trap. In April 2012, a U.S. Forest Service law enforcement officer named James Schaufler was on patrol in a popular recreation area located off Big Springs Trail in Provo Canyon, Utah. While on foot, he came across what looked to be a tripwire, and to his horror, he discovered a primitive booby trap that was set to activate when said tripwire was crossed. The device was made of a large rock and had sharpened sticks on it, forming kind of like a spiked ball that of course could hit an unsuspecting person and cause some serious harm. After dismantling the trap, he found another tripwire designed to send someone falling into a bed of sharpened wooden spikes, very Mortal Kombat style. Schaufler's quick thinking and sharp eyesight prevented a potentially very serious incident from happening, as the booby traps were located only half a mile from the recreation area's parking lot. It was fortunate that no one was injured, especially since there was a child's birthday party being held in the area at the time. Yikes. The traps were dismantled, and Schaufler's actions were instrumental, obviously, in keeping people safe while enjoying the area's natural beauty. Thank you, James. The next story comes from us to another Reddit user, Shiny Brian, who picked quite the spot to relieve himself. He had a job fighting forest fires in the Pacific Northwest and described his scariest encounter as such. My scariest wilderness encounter was about 2 a.m. while maintaining a fire line on a 300-acre fire caused by a lightning strike. I needed to take a number one, and the rule is you don't take a number one on the fire. So I walked over towards a stump outside the fire line. I was about 50 feet away from the stump when it walked away. It was a black bear. I feel like I would have just shrunk into myself if this ever happened to me. I mean, just seeing a stump you were looking at move, first of all, is scary, and then to see it's a bear, yeah, no thanks. Alright, Lake Crescent in Olympic National Park is steeped in legend and ghost stories. One of the most popular legends surrounding the lake is that it was created when part of Mount Storm King fell onto a battlefield, crushing the combatants and creating the bed of the lake, according to legend anyway. However, a more recent and factual story is that of the Lady of the Lake. In 1940, the body of a woman was found floating in the lake. Her body was eerily well preserved, likely due to the natural process of saponification, which gave her skin a kind of waxy texture. The woman was later identified Haley Latham Illingworth, a local tavern server who had disappeared in 1937. Her husband, Monty, was identified as the culprit after authorities found strangulation bruises on her body. Despite the mystery being solved though, visitors to the area still report seeing the ghost of her lingering on the shores of Lake Crescent, making it one of Washington's most haunted trails, supposedly. Next up, we have the bear attack. Jordan Carberry, a Canadian park ranger in Bella Coola, British Columbia, had come across some bear cubs in a tree. Never a good sign. You do not want to come across grizzly bear cubs in the wild, as cute as they are, because where they are, the mother is close by, and she does not want to see you. And this was no exception. One of these cubs happened to fall out of the tree and caught the attention of the protective mother bear, who began charging towards him. The grizzly bear tackled him from behind, picked him up by his head. Bear then picked him up again by his thigh and dropped him down repeatedly. Using what he had learned from a defensive training class though, the park ranger, Carberry, kicked the bear in the face as hard as he could and managed to create enough space to run back to his house. Since he didn't have cell service though, Carberry actually had to drive himself to the hospital with one arm over his belly, just telling himself repeatedly not to pass out. Despite his injuries, Carberry did recover, and during recovery was quoted as saying he felt fan-freaking-tastic. So amazing. The last story here, this is a personal story, at least one that happened to a buddy of mine. I call it the Waving Man. So my buddy used to be a camp counselor. So yeah, not a park ranger, but hey, close enough. Anyway, he took kids out on portaging trips. It used to be like days-long trips. We'd canoe, and then you'd, traverse through the forest with the canoe, and then you'd canoe again. That's what it's called. Anyway, so one day they're canoeing, they're getting to their next site, and they happen across this man on the side of the shore, and he's kind of asking my buddy, hey, where are you guys camping and all this stuff? And my buddy Max, he doesn't really tell him because obviously he's got kids with him. He doesn't want some guy coming around their campsite. But they make it to their campsite that night. They set up the fire, they set up their tents. The kids go to bed. Him and his fellow camp counselor are in their tent. And then they start to hear what sounds like footsteps kind of walking around their campsite. And they're thinking like, okay, maybe it's one of the kids who's up or something like that. Unzip their tent, nobody. Totally empty campsite. Now they're obviously a little bit freaked out, right? Zip up the tent again. They hear those footsteps once again. They're like, do you hear that? Yeah, like I hear there's something. And keep in mind, they got kids with them, so they have to, obviously protect the kids. My buddy Max pulls out an axe he had with them, set up a fire, and they just stay up all night, just waiting for whoever this is to come out, or, might have to use that axe. They were really freaked out. Anyway, night goes by fine, no one ends up showing up. Head back on their canoes the next morning, and as they're heading down the river, they see that same man they met the day before just on the side of the shore, just waving and smiling at them. So, I don't know.